Good morning, and welcome, and thank you for attending. I am Vicki Gaddy, Vice President, Talent Services for BioNJ. Our team is very excited to bring this webinar to you through the Academy at BioNJ, courtesy of our training partners at Gilman Performance Systems. We're glad you're here. First, a little housekeeping. This is a listen-only webinar, so you'll be able to ask questions at the end of the presentation. If there are questions asked that we're not able to get to, we will plan to address them in a follow-up email with everyone. In addition, we'll post the webinar on the bionj.org website in the very near future, so stay tuned for that. A huge part of our commitment to the life sciences community here at BioNJ is to bring important learning opportunities on current topics by offering programs hosted through the Academy at BioNJ. We provide access to training experts on a wide variety of topics. BioNJ's talent services include the opportunity for employers to post job openings to our career site, request our assistance for talent, utilize our employee transition services in times of restructuring activities, and become involved in our human resources forum meetings and annual HR industry conference. In addition, benefiting from a variety of training programs provided through the Academy itself. We invite you to contact our talent services team to learn more about the many ways we can help you. So now on to today's program. As Sharon Denson of GPS will soon tell you, Section 503 has several important new developments which apply to federal contractors and subcontractors. Section 503 prohibits employment discrimination and is intended to encourage hiring of candidates with disabilities. There are specific metrics employers must meet and reporting requirements which require very focused attention. At this time, it is my pleasure to turn the program over to Sharon so we can all benefit from her expertise and knowledge on this very important subject. Welcome, Sharon.
Vicki, thank you so much. I really am thrilled to be here today. I want, number one, to help you at BioNJ with understanding Section 503, and also because I was born and raised for a number of years in New Jersey, and it's great to be back in New Jersey, even if it is just virtually. So today we're going to talk about understanding your responsibilities under Section 503. But before I do that, I briefly want to let you know about what the BioNJ Academy offers along with its partnership with Gilman Performance Systems. And as you can see on this slide, there are a number of programs that are designed to help your life and make your life a lot easier. And that is our intention at Gilman Performance Systems and BioNJ. Okay, I'm having a little challenge with my slides here. Next. Okay. So like I said, we're going to have a brief introduction to the basics of Section 503 compliance, and this is targeted to the human resources professionals. One of the challenges with Section 503 is that a lot of the programs and webinars are targeted to contracting professionals. However, it's the HR professionals who are on the front lines of compliance with Section 503. Next. So today we're going to take some time to understand Section 503 and your company's obligations under the revised regulation so your company is prepared for an audit from OFCCP. We're going to have the opportunity to gauge the level of your compliance. And it's time probably to pat yourself on the back for what you've done so far. That is really important. And understand that it is a process, and it's a process that every federal contractor is going through because there's a great deal of change. Also, I wanted to talk to you about how compliance is really going to benefit your company. We all know about the upcoming challenges that companies are going to have over the next 20 years in terms of finding qualified employees, this is your opportunity, and you can look at it this way, to tap into what I call the hidden workforce, and that is job candidates with disabilities. So you are on the front lines of that. We're also going to talk about how, how BioNJ can help you. And again, we have this webinar, and we will be glad to set up future trainings on Section 503 that will walk you through what you need to do and make your compliance stress-free. Now, why did they revise Section 503? Section 503, and this is taken directly from the regulation, prohibits employment discrimination against individuals with disabilities by federal contractors and subcontractors. The new regulations are a tool for reducing barriers to equal employment opportunity for people with disabilities, and that is the reason why Section 503 was revised. But let's look at the difference between the various laws regarding disability in the workplace. First of all, we all know about the Americans with Disabilities Act, and I first thought about these slides after a conversation I had with a partner in a law firm about Section 503, and that individual said to me, well, isn't it like the ADA? And no, it is not like the Americans with Disabilities Act. And when it comes to employment, when you're talking about the ADA, and you see the little picture here, it is a non-discrimination law, a civil rights law. It's there to level the playing field. And the ADA not only covers employment, but public accommodations, access to government services. So the ADA is broad in its coverage. And it was amended in 2008 under the ADA Amendments Act. So you get an idea of what the ADA means to your company by looking at that slide. Next. Section 503, the older Section 503, which is part of the Rehabilitation Act, which is a predecessor to the ADA, says that you can't really discriminate. You should welcome qualified job applicants with disabilities. And this is very important because it's a federal contractor. The federal government does have some control over how your company works. And so they're asking you to welcome people, individuals with disabilities. But that has since changed. Now we have the revised Section 503, and this has gone to an affirmative action plan, and I believe we all know what that is. So you are required to actively pursue applications from qualified persons with disabilities. And as you can see in the cartoon here, you have a couple of, we look like HR people chasing down someone in a wheelchair. We are looking for you. What are the goals of Section 503? First of all, it requires for the first time a utilization goal of 7% for people with disabilities. How does that translate? It means that 7% of your workforce should be comprised of people with disabilities. The goal is applicable to federal contractors and subcontractors doing more than $10,000 in business with the federal government. Now, this is aggregate. So if you have 4 $2,500 contracts, that means you're doing $10,000 in business with the federal government. It is applied at the job group level. Let me explain that a little bit and talk to you about when it's applied at the job group level. If your company has 100 or more employees, it is applied at the job group level, and essentially that means by type of job. So you want 7% of all the lawyers in your company, 7% of the executives, 7% of the people on the factory floor, 7% of people in your distribution center. However, if your company has fewer than 100 employees, it is 7% of the entire company. Now, this is neither a quota nor a ceiling, which limits or restricts employment to people with disabilities. So if you have more than 7%, go for it. That is absolutely fantastic. Now, who is an individual with a disability? And this is according to the Americans with Disabilities Act and the Amendments Act of 2008. It means an individual with a physical or mental impairment that substantially limits one or more major life activity of such individual. A record of such an impairment and being regarded as having such an impairment. Those are the three prongs, so to speak, of the definition of a disability. When you say a physical or mental impairment, you're talking about something like walking, talking, speaking, hearing, seeing. We all know about what that means. However, with the Americans with Disabilities Amendments Act, that definition has been broadened considerably to include individuals with cancer, diabetes, AIDS, and many other conditions which were previously not considered as being a disability. Now, you have to have a record of such an impairment, which means you have a medical record, a record asking for an accommodation from your employer, and also you have to be regarded as having such an impairment. So this means that even if someone does not have a disability, but people think they do, they might be covered by the Americans with Disabilities Act, and this is the weakest of the three prongs. Now, what is in the affirmative action policy? Like I said, Section 503 now is an affirmative action policy. What that means is that contractors shall not discriminate because of physical or mental disability and shall take affirmative action, which means you have to go for it, to employ and advance in employment qualified individuals with disabilities at all levels of employment, including the executive level. And that's a very important part when you're thinking about hiring people with disabilities. Let me say one more thing quickly about the affirmative action plan. That applies to your company if your company has more than 50 employees and does more than $50,000 in business with the federal government. If your company does fewer employees or does less business, then you have to do all of the things which I will talk about. However, you do not have to write an affirmative action plan. Now, your role as a human resources person in compliance with Section 503 has to do with outreach and recruiting, the application process, interviewing, hiring, your company policy in general, and record keeping. What are some of your new responsibilities under revised Section 503? You have to go do outreach, and your job candidate search must change in that you're actively seeking people with disabilities. And you have to communicate, and this is more of a contracting obligation, with your subcontractors. And every contract with a subcontractor has to have a paragraph, which you can find on the OFCCP website, that states your compliance with Section 503 and their possible compliance if they're doing $10,000 or more business with you or another federal contractor. Recruiting. Changes to the recruiting process include actively, like I said, actively finding and identifying job candidates with disabilities, making the application and interview process accessible to persons with disabilities, and self-identification as a person with a disability as part of the interview and intake process. This is something that is very new. You are required to ask a person to self-identify as a person with a disability when they apply for a job with your company. As for making everything accessible to people with disabilities in terms of your application process, this was required under the Americans with Disabilities Act. Now it is going to be enforced by OFCCP. As to the application and interviewing process, you want to ensure that your application process makes it intuitive and comfortable for an applicant to self-identify as an individual with a disability. It's advisable your applicant tracking system be set up to track applications from individuals with disabilities in order to facilitate your reporting with OFCCP. And I recommend this because what's going to happen is part of your reporting is you have to tell us, OFCCP, how many applicants with disabilities have applied for a position. And then after that, how many were interviewed, how many actually were accepted for employment or given job offers, and how many were hired. So having a system do that for you makes life a lot easier. Now, we want to ensure, like I said, we want to ensure that the process makes it intuitive and easy. You want to make it very easy for someone to self-identify. Can we get to our next slide, please? All right. Self-identification. The federal contractor is required to invite applicants to self-identify as an individual with a disability at the pre-offer state, when they're in that pre-offer state of the hiring process, in addition to self-identification after the job offer. So they get 2 opportunities to self-identify. And that is done with a form that is found on the OFCCP website. Most federal contractors I know have already put this into place. Next. The job offer. The contractor, in making hiring decisions, should consider applicants who are known to have disabilities for all available positions for which they may be qualified. Again, I am reading from the regulation. When the position applied for is unavailable. This is a big advantage for you, so if you have a great applicant, you gave the job to somebody else, and another opportunity comes up, you have someone in hand to offer that position to. Next. The job offer. Both job applicants and employees are entitled to reasonable accommodations which enable that person to accomplish the essential functions of that job. And that is the whole picture for your accommodations. They are reasonable. And most accommodations cost little or no money. And the easiest way to find out what accommodations an individual needs is to ask them. Next. InReach. I call this InReach because you are going to be communicating as part of Section 503 with your incumbent employees. The employees at all levels must be educated as to the contractor's affirmative action policy and the required actions it must take under Section 503. So there must be posters throughout the company. There must be company communications. And again, we can talk to you by Gilman Performance Systems, and I can talk to you about what those can be. And it is important so that that is part of creating that inclusive workplace. Next. You must reach out to present employees, giving them the opportunity to self-identify as an individual with a disability. This activity should have been done or should be done at the start of compliance with the revised Section 503, which was last year, March 24th, and it can be repeated every 5 years. The incumbent employee must fill out the same self-identification form. And again, it is a generic form. It does not say who the person is, who is self-identifying, and it is very easy to fill out. We are finding that, however, many companies who know how many people with disabilities they have as incumbent employees are not getting those numbers back. And it is important when you send out that form that you explain why you're sending out that form, what constitutes an individual with disability, and that information will be held privately. Next. All personnel involved in the recruitment, screening, selection, disciplinary, and related processes shall be trained to ensure that the commitments in the contractor's affirmative action program are implemented. And with a couple of slides, we'll get to what that training means. That training, again, is really important and part of your compliance with Section 503. Next. All the actions described in this presentation must be recorded so that they can be reported. So you must record everything that you do in your efforts for compliance. And don't leave anything out. Even the smallest thing is important. Next. I'm going to talk a bit about creating an inclusive corporate culture. That is very important. Really, it is really to your advantage to look at Section 503 as an opportunity. And that opportunity is to create that inclusive culture. And that inclusive culture means diversity and inclusion in general. You have to recognize that attitudes change with a combination of training and experience. we are not set up to be open to people of difference. That's just the way we are. And I do a whole training on that. The bottom line is that Gilman Performance Systems and BioNJ are available to train on all aspects of recruiting, accommodating, and working with individuals with disabilities. And this will help you create that inclusive corporate culture. Next. Now, are you ready for your audit by OFCCP? Here is a quick checklist containing some of the most important requirements. Now, these are only a few, this is not all of them, and you really can't get totally trained on Section 503 in the short time that we have together. First of all, have you asked job applicants to disclose a disability pre- and post-offer using OFCCP's official form? This is the form that you need to use. You cannot change the content of that form. You can put your company logo on it. You can put it in, you need to put it on your application system. However, the form must be the form that is required by OFCCP. Like I had said before, it's really important in presenting the form both to applicants and to incumbent employees that they understand the reason why they are filling out that form, that the information will be held confidentially, and that by filling out the form and by disclosing a disability if they have one, they are helping your company with their compliance. And also they understand completely the definition of an individual with a disability. I had one company I was working with that is known for its hiring of people with disabilities. And their actual numbers of people with disabilities that they have in their location is close to 40%. They were getting back forms that gave them 20%. And this is an issue that many of the companies that we work with are finding. The challenge is that we have to really make sure that we are communicating with our employees who is considered a person with a disability and how important it is to fill out that form. And that definition of disability is of top importance. And we believe that in this particular company, these individuals many of them coming off of Social Security disability, thought, well, I am working, so I don't have a disability. And that is true. By definition, under Social Security disability, if you are working, you don't have a disability. So in their minds, they were filling out the form correctly. However, the company was not getting back the numbers that they thought they had. They were well over 7%, but they weren't getting back the true numbers. Now, again, have you asked your incumbent employees to disclose disabilities using the above form? I just went through that. Again, very important. This is done every 5 years. It's done every 5 years because things change. And I also recommend that if someone has a disability or acquires a disability, and you know that they've come to HR to ask for an accommodation, that you have them fill out the form so you can count them at the time that they acquired that disability, although that is not required, but it helps you in your numbers. Have you trained all members of your hiring team on the mandated training? Now, when you look at the regulation, they tell you that there are mandated trainings. Everyone, like I said, and I quoted from the regulation, in the hiring process has to be trained. When you look at the comments, you find there are 2 trainings which are required. They're training on your Section 503 regulations, and so all your HR people, recruiting people, and hiring managers know what your responsibilities are under the regulations. This is very important. It's important so that they are willing and able to welcome individuals with disabilities into their workplaces, and they understand why, they understand what they have to do. And disability etiquette and awareness, and I can't emphasize this one enough. The reason being that we are just not built for diversity. Think about it for a moment. If you go into a party and there are a group of people that you don't know, you are most likely to go up to and talk to the people that look most like you, who seem to be involved in the same activities as you, and you're more likely to hang out with them. Or if there's somebody you know, you're going to hang out with that person. So we're just not built for diversity. And so one of the biggest challenges that companies who are hiring with disabilities have is, number one, getting the buy-in from the hiring managers, getting them comfortable working with disabilities, getting your HR people comfortable working with people with disabilities. I just did a training for the Department of Labor for the state of Connecticut because their contractors would need to be working now with people with disabilities, and they were not comfortable. And these are people who worked day to day for the Department of Labor in the unemployment division. They needed this training, and it ended up helping them immensely, and so do your people. So I highly recommend, not only recommended, but it is required. Next. Has your staff attended recommended trainings? And these are being recommended by Gilman Performance Systems, but they're also recommended by anybody who is involved in the hiring and retention of people with disabilities. We have disability etiquette and awareness for team members. You want to make sure that when that person with a disability rolls into their cubicle, that everyone around them feels as comfortable as possible. They know what to say. They know what not to say. They know what to expect. And this is very important to retain those team members. We all know how expensive it is to recruit and hire and train an employee. And turnover is so very expensive. So you want to make sure that that person with a disability feels welcome. And by that training and with that training, they can feel welcome. You also want to have training on the Americans with Disabilities Act. The Americans with Disabilities Act is celebrating its 25th anniversary this June, next month. We're all very excited about that. However, with the Americans with Disabilities Act, if you notice, and even if you walk around your community, you will notice there are a lot of places that are not accessible to individuals with physical disabilities. And there's a reason for this. And the reason is that there is compliance by complaint. So basically, if no one comes in and complains that they cannot get into a store or they cannot get into a public, something that they should have public access to, then nobody really knows. And there is nothing in place to ensure compliance with the Americans with Disabilities Act. But now, as a federal contractor, as the basis for your compliance with Section 503, you have to be compliant with the ADA. And OFCCP will be looking at that. So are your locations handicapped accessible? Do you have the appropriate parking spaces for people with disabilities? Are your bathrooms accessible? All of these things are going to be looked at by OFCCP because you cannot hire an individual with disability if they cannot access your location and if it is not appropriate for them. So this is a very important part of your training, and though it is not mandated, we highly recommend that you train your people on the ADA. And when it comes to building codes and access for individuals with disabilities, there are two levels of compliance. One is the Americans with Disabilities Act, and then there is the building code in your county in New Jersey. Okay, and sometimes that is a higher standard than the Americans with Disabilities Act. Gilman Performance Systems is here to help you with that. So if you need help with that, we're here to help you along with BioNJ. So it's really important that you have that in place so when it's time to hire those people with disabilities, you are ready to go. Next. Have you held a town hall meeting? This is required by OFCCP, where your company leadership explains your company's obligations under Section 503. Now, that is not directly your responsibility as an HR person, but as someone who has contact with the upper management in your company, it is a good idea to remind them of this responsibility. This town hall meeting lets everyone in your company knows why there are changes, why they're going to see posters, why they're going to see individuals with disabilities coming into your company as employees. And it's going to get them ready for that. So it's extremely important. And also it shows buy-in from the top level of your company. So when you have buy-in from the top level, you find generally buy-in moves from the top down. So when you have buy-in from the top level, you will get support for everything you need to do under Section 503 to be compliant, and so will everyone else who needs to work with compliance. Have you completed the required outreach to organizations which can connect you to qualified candidates with disabilities? This is required under Section 503. In fact, the regulation actually lists the type of organizations with which you can connect. One which I highly recommend is the Business Leadership Network in your area, and I am the Executive Director of the Connecticut Business Leadership Network. There is a wonderful New Jersey Business Leadership Network. That the Business Leadership Networks work with human resources regarding best practices for hiring people with disabilities, and they can connect you with the organizations that can help you find qualified candidates. I also recommend that talk to other companies, see what other people are doing, but that outreach needs to be recorded, and you also have to report what agencies or organizations you have spoken with, who you have actually connected with, and how that has worked out, whether it was a positive or negative connection, and whether you were actually able to find employees through that connection. That is part of your reporting. Next, have you recorded all of your disability recruiting actions? That is extremely important. Again, having a system to do that would be very, very helpful. So every time you attend a meeting where they are talking about best practices for hiring people with disabilities, that has to be recorded. Every time you contact an organization, again, that works with individuals with disabilities, that has to be recorded. So again, everything you do has to be recorded as part of your reporting for that OFCCP audit. Nothing is trivial. So the more you report, the better off you're going to be, and the more in compliance you're going to be. And I'm going to say quickly about something about the required outreach. You want to ensure that the organizations that you're making outreach to can actually help you find the candidates that you need. I was just working with an organization, with a company that connected, and this is through Connecticut Business Leadership Network, connected with one of our companies that does major hiring of people with disabilities. And they recommended an organization to, I will say, Company B, the company that asked them for help. This organization visited Company B, went over all the requirements of hiring people with disabilities, and scared their managers to death. Because the type of people that this organization works with was not the type of person that the company was looking for. This organization worked with primarily warehouse and distribution center employees, and the company that was recruiting was looking for people with a bachelor's degree and people who could do customer service and do bachelor level and above work, people with PhDs. They were looking for that type of individual. The organization they outreached to was obviously not the right organization. So what I would say and what I would recommend that you do, and it's really important, is think about your company first. What is your hiring profile? And you already know this. And then, after that, then go out and find organizations that will connect you with those individuals. Next. Now, Creating an inclusive workplace is very, very important. As I had said, you want to use Section 503 to your advantage. When you create an inclusive workplace, where you create one for people with disabilities, you're creating an inclusive workplace for all different types of differences. And we have some things that will help you do that. We have a course on Section 503 for HR and recruiting professionals. Again, it goes in more detail than what we've gone through today. This was one of those required trainings. We have one on effective recruiting techniques for hiring individuals with disabilities. You want to create how to create an accessible recruiting process. You don't want individuals with disabilities to be turned away at the door, so to speak, before they even get the opportunity to apply for a position with your company. And then next is interviewing individuals with disabilities or persons with disabilities, including information on creating an accessible interviewing environment and disability etiquette. This training is available as a live training, which is recommended for recruiting on HR professionals, and as a webinar, which can be effectively used by hiring managers as needed. Hopefully your hiring managers are not hiring every day, so any information they may get, let's say at the beginning of this year, they may forget by the time it's time to interview the individual with a disability. You can make that process easy, you could make it effective, and you could make it comfortable for everyone involved. And this can be really of great benefit to your company, not only for your compliance with Section 503, but for creating that inclusive workplace and making your workplace one of the best places to work. Next. In addition to that, we have welcoming colleagues with disabilities. This is our disability etiquette for coworkers or team member training. This is available as both a live training and a webinar. We recommend that if it's done as a webinar, that you have someone from HR to facilitate. So if there are any questions, they can be answered. This training can make the difference between somebody being happy in their employment, feeling welcome, feeling like they can communicate with their coworkers, and having their coworkers feel like they can communicate with that individual. And this leads to much greater retention and a much happier workplace. We also have a training on disability and accommodations. We go through the legal and practical considerations in offering accommodations to your employees. Again, this is offered as both a live training and a webinar. We recommend the live training for HR professionals and the webinar, again, for your hiring managers. So if you have hiring managers in locations throughout the country, this is really important so that they know what accommodations they can offer and they know how to ask the individual if they need accommodations. Those accommodations can mean the difference between that person performing their job at a top level to the best of their ability and not being able to perform their job, even if they are qualified to do that job. We also have creating inclusive company events. I have been to company events, and by the way, I use a wheelchair for mobility, and I have been to company events which I was unable to attend once I got there. And it was annoying to me, but incredibly embarrassing for the people who were holding the event. Nobody wants to be embarrassed like that. So these are techniques for ensuring that all employees can access company-sponsored events. This is important for your ADA, not only for your ADA compliance, but just for the fact that an employee wants to feel valued and for team effectiveness. So if your individual with disability can't access the company event, then, like I said, it's embarrassing and sends a message which you really don't want to send. Next.
Okay. So Sharon, this is fantastic information, and I'm going to suggest that we jump over to the questions from the audience, and we do have a few. So
Okay.
if I may, I'm going to start with the first one. The first question is, does the 7% include employees outside of the U.S.? For example, we have employees located in different regions working on the same team at the same job level. Can you respond to that?
My understanding is that it does not include employees outside of the U.S. I will, however, call OFCCP to make sure that I am correct in this. But my understanding, this is for locations. This goes for locations only in the United States, Section 503.
Okay, great. Thank you very much, Sharon. And we can include that response, any additional information, in an email that we'll send afterwards.
Yes.
So question number 2, does disability include temporary disabilities, such as a broken arm?
No, it does not. You may have to have an accommodation for that individual with a broken arm while they have it, but they cannot be counted as an individual with a disability under Section 503.
Okay, great. Question number 3. Is there a good e-training on awareness and etiquette for this topic? Is there something you can recommend or suggest, Sharon?
Yes. Gilman Performance Systems has an excellent e-training, and in our partnership with Section 503, we can offer that to you. Like I said in the presentation, we recommend that there be somebody there to facilitate, and it could be an HR person or whoever to facilitate and ask questions, you know, and write down the questions and all of that. And we can actually answer them after the recorded webinar. If necessary, you can send them to us.
Okay, thank you, Sharon. Sharon, before we close, any final comments from you?
Okay. I believe that you should take advantage of Section 503 and make it an opportunity for your company to find really, really great employees who just happen to have disabilities. And if you go at it with that attitude, you're going to have a very, very successful outcome. And that's what it's all about. The best way to do that is to think of it as your opportunity to find great employees, not just the opportunity to check off boxes on a checklist. Because if you go about it from the checklist standpoint, you might end up with problems with retention. You might not be able to find employees who are going to work appropriately for your company, and you're going to have a very frustrating time. So you want to make this, I say make everything fun. This could be fun. It could be a learning opportunity for you. It could open up all kinds of new vistas for you and your company. And thank you so much for the opportunity to talk to you.
Sharon, actually, there's one more question, and I think it's an important one, so we would like to share this with everyone. Let me read it. So can you provide advice on the subcontractor relationship? Who is considered a subcontractor? For example, would a contract sales organization recruiting and building a sales field team to promote federal contractor clients, say big pharma, products, be considered a subcontractor?
Yes, they would be.
They would be, and so they would be included in this scope of work.
Yes, and the reason being, if they are assisting you in your federal contract, in the completion of your federal contract, then then they would be considered subcontractors. So if they're doing something that's totally unrelated to your federal contract, they would not be. But if it's related to your obligations under your federal contract, they are subcontractors.
Okay, great. Sharon, thank you very much. This has been a lot of good information. We appreciate it. Really great questions, so thank you to everybody on the line. BioNJ, Sharon Denson, Gilman Performance Systems, We're here to help you. Let us know how we can provide resources, advice, training services, and so on to help with hiring, accommodating, and retaining individuals with disabilities for your organization. So thank you again, everyone, for attending today's webinar and for all of your questions. If we didn't get to your questions today, we'll have Sharon address them afterwards. Or if you have questions that you think of, once we conclude the program, you are more than welcome to email them to me here at BioNJ, vgaddy@bionj.org, and we will get a response for you and share those with the audience. So this concludes our program for today. Thank you so much to Sharon Denson and GPS for leading us through this amazing and comprehensive presentation. And thank you for everyone for your participation and your interest in this topic. Okay, thank you. Bye-bye.